We'll probably start letting people in a minute. Some very early people in the waiting room. They've been here for like 10 minutes. Emily, now I can't hear you.
I'm one of those people who usually signs on at least 5 minutes ahead of time just to make sure I have the address right.
Nice.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, praise be.
I can hear someone else too, but I'm guessing that will.
It's like what is yes. There, I can do about that.
I think it's getting better. I think Zoom is like learning that it isn't you.
Okay, so those. We'll do our best. I'll project as much as I possibly can. Let me just get the opening slide up. Share screen. I'm having audio issues. On and off.
Looks great.
Okay. Great.
They should just maybe be warned. They're really no secrets in that office. Cool. Okay. Are we good?
I think so.
Drew, are you trying to play piano or should I let people in without?
You can't hear it at all, really?
Not even a little bit.
Oh, that's weird. I'm using just the internal mic on my computer. So maybe I'll switch over to my headset.
Just an FYI before you let folks in, I can't see anyone's videos or faces. So if you are waving to me physically, I will not be able to see that. You will need to either verbally or in the chat indicate to me that something is wrong.
Oh no. Okay.
Sure. Why.
Some music in a little bit. Go ahead.
All right. I'm going to let people in. Everybody's got that.
Copy that. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to wait about a minute to let some other folks join, but thank you for being here. Morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We get started in a few. Good morning, folks. People are still trickling in, so we're going to give it another minute, but we'll get started soon. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Community Engaged Planning WaterTalks workshop for Rio Hondo and Upper San Gabriel River. We're so glad that you're able to join us this morning. Thanks for making the time. This is going to be a really packed 2-hour workshop. So I know we're all used to Zoom at this point, but I just want to remind you to take care of yourselves, video mute and step away if you need to. And unless we're in a breakout room, which we will have about halfway through, just remain on video mute so everyone can enjoy the workshop. If you're having any technical issues or have any concerns around Zoom, you can chat that concern, and we have folks that are prepared to help resolve any problems. So with that, we'll start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land in the Greater LA Region's watershed are unceded ancestral homelands of many tribal communities, including the Serrano, the Gabrielino Tongva, the Ventrino Chumash, the Gabrielino Quiche, and the Fredenino Tataviam nations. We gratefully acknowledge the Native peoples on whose homelands we live and who are the ancestral stewards of the land and water. We make this acknowledgement out of respect for their longstanding connection to and protection of this area's watershed. The Upper San Gabriel River and Rio Hondo Irwin region is the unceded ancestral homelands of the Gabrielino Tongva, the Serrano, the Gabrielino Quiche, and the Fredenino Tataviam nations. We urge you to learn more about how to engage with tribal communities in your water work by engaging with Sacred Places Institute and watching their recording of their water training, Allyship with Tribal Communities workshop. You can scan this QR code with your phone to view that workshop, and we'll post the link in the chat as well. Maybe don't watch it now because you're in this workshop, but it's a really great resource, so we encourage you to check it out. And with that, I will pass it to Amanda Begley.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Amanda Begley, and I am a project manager at Tree People, and I'm going to introduce the WaterTalks program. So WaterTalks is a public program designed to generate and increase community involvement in planning a sustainable water future in California. It is funded through California Proposition 1, or the Integrated Regional Water Management, or IRWM, or IRWM system. Locally, this program is called WaterTalks. And its goal is to involve 128 under-resourced communities in Los Angeles and Ventura counties in the design of water projects and programs that provide direct benefit to those same communities. Tree People serves as the primary consultant in the GLAC, or the Greater LA County region, under guidance from the Los Angeles County Flood Control District and the WaterTalks Task Force. We work in a tight-knit partnership with Council for Watershed Health, Stantec, Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples, and a dozen CBOs. The program has been in place since 2019 with 4 major components. Number 1, authentic and often action-based community engagement, working with local organizations trusted by their communities. Number 2, a thorough strengths and needs assessment completed in 2021. Data from this assessment is available at the website listed on the screen, that Redesign LA, and a final narrative report will be released in the next several weeks. 3, development of projects that were identified based on the needs assessment. We feel we have been using community identified need to drive project design choices. And number 4, workshops such as this today that share what we've been learning and strengthen the process of community-driven design. We've held workshops specific to community-based organizations, audiences wanting to be allies with tribal communities, and today for representatives from public agencies, elected offices, and interested community leaders. I will now turn it over to Emily Finnegan from Stantec. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Amanda. And great to see some familiar names and faces with us this morning, and also great to see some newer folks. As Amanda said, my name is Emily Finnegan. I am a public affairs specialist with the Stantec team and have been working deeply in the WaterTalks program with Tree People, Council for Watershed Health, Sacred Places Institute for Indigenous Peoples, and our community partners. When folks registered for today's workshop, we asked them to share what they were most excited to learn. And we heard a pretty broad range of topics. We also asked folks to share what their level of familiarity is with community engaged water planning. And really the answers were quite ranging across the board. And to give us a sense of who we have with us in the room today, I'd love if everyone could share in the chat your name, your affiliation, and for folks, I know we had some later registrants, and what brought you to today's workshop, what you hope to get out of today's workshop. As Amanda just mentioned, this workshop is part of a broader series that's really designed to share what we learned through the WaterTalks process to strengthen community engagement in regional water planning. We designed this series so that each session has topics that build upon the previous sessions, hopefully so that attendees participate in all sessions and can maximize their learning and opportunities for collaboration. But we've also designed each individual session so that you can attend just one workshop and still maximize your benefit. So for folks that weren't able to join the first workshop in our series back in the spring, I'm going to give a quick overview of what we touched on to bring you up to speed on building on what we learned from the spring. So back in early spring, we talked about the policies and practices that supported collaborative water planning. And we took the kind of watershed perspective of integrated water management. We talked a lot about California's history of water management, siloing, decision-making, and dissecting every aspect of the water cycle into different jurisdictions and different areas of management. And as a result of those decisions, we have separate agencies with different decision-making responsibilities that each affect one another, but don't necessarily interact with one another. For instance, groundwater and stormwater are inherently tied to one another, but they are managed typically by separate entities with different scales of responsibilities and different geographic jurisdictions. We also touched on socio-ecological systems, looking at our social systems, our policies and governance, as well as our natural systems, the resources that we depend on, and how those two systems are intrinsically connected. With that historical foundation and background, we then moved into the practice that really underpins integrated planning, the practice of systems thinking. Systems thinking recognizes the interconnectedness of issues and proactively identifies where there are connections and how those connections may influence one another. It also recognizes that our resources, particularly water, doesn't follow jurisdictional lines, which makes holistic water planning and natural resource management pretty challenging. In our breakout groups during our spring session, we built systems maps of our roles and responsibilities in the water world and worked in breakout groups to identify opportunities for greater alignment where we can leverage shared work or shared priorities, as well as opportunities to better engage community voice in decision-making within our respective roles. With this systems approach, we then dove into the policies that support integrated planning. And we looked at two different programs. The first was the statewide Integrated Regional Water Management Program, also referred to often in its acronym of IRWM. And locally, the IRWM program is advancing community-driven planning through WaterTalks, which Amanda gave a great overview of earlier. We learned how WaterTalks has been partnering with community-based organizations and tribal-led organizations to identify community strengths and needs, and then develop projects around those community-identified priorities. At the regional scale, we looked at the Safe Clean Water Program, which operates across LA County, and we'll be digging much more into that later today. We talked back in the spring about Safe Clean Water Program as an opportunity to advance coordination and collaboration. And today we'll talk a lot more about that program and opportunities to further integrate community engagement into regional water planning here in Los Angeles County. So as we dig into today's topic, community engaged planning, I would really encourage you all to remember the principles of systems thinking and coordinated planning. While planning is departmentalized, community members see and experience the interconnectedness of environmental, economic, and social challenges. And that's why community engagement provides an opportunity to learn from the community and understand these integrations to help identify opportunities for coordination and integration. I will turn it over to your Safe Clean Water Program regional coordinators.
Hi, this is Richard Watson. Julie Millette and I work together on the Rio Hondo watershed area, and Hummus works on the upper San Gabriel. We're going to share this presentation. I just wanted to take a moment here while you see the two maps there in the corners. The two watershed groups really share substantially 6 different cities that are run along the eastern edge of the Rio Hondo, and then little bits of a 7th city. And so we've been doing some stuff together, and we'll continue doing work together, because it makes a lot of sense that, and as you look at that map, you see that little dark spot up there, part of Duarte, and then you move our map over and you see how we fit into that notch. So the two areas are integrated physically considerably. Next slide, please. Thank you. So community engagement and the Safe Clean Water Program is really evolving. There's a new guidance that's been developed, which will be discussed in greater detail. But where this all started was with the ordinance passed by the voters in 2018. And then there's a second ordinance adopted by the Board of Supervisors in 2019, which gives information about implementation of the program. Then you see that reference to interim guidance, and you'll see in a moment there are 4 components of that. The key for our group is the one on community engagement, but there's another one related to disadvantaged communities that's really locked in also. And one of the things that's going on concurrently right now is the so-called metrics and monitoring study. It started really with some workshops last year. There are a couple workshops in April or January and April. The whole program will be completed in 2023. And it's really designed to take a look at the measurements that'll help us improve community engagement during the process. And then you see there's a biennial review there, and this is programmed in the ordinances. So there'll be a real review going on during this next year. Next slide, please. Now turn it over to Julie.
Hi there, I'm Julie Millette. There are 4 components, as Rich mentioned, to the interim guidance that was released this year. We're focusing on number 1 here, strengthening community engagement and support. And you'll see there's also the water supply guidance, programming of nature-based solutions, and implementing disadvantaged community policies in the regional program. We'll be talking quite a bit about the engagement component, and you'll be hearing a lot about that today in the presentation. We can talk about it later in the breakout groups. Next slide, please. When writing the interim guidance, the district used these 3 sources as primary influences. Spectrum of community engagement to ownership, which was originally developed by Rosa Gonzalez of Facilitating Power in partnership with Movement Strategy Center. Principios y Comunidad, principles that redefine strategies and approaches for impactful community engagement, which was developed and prepared by Mujeres de la Tierra. And then subsequently, an expert team from UCLA has been involved significantly in the engagement as well. And I will turn it over to James.
Thank you, Julie. Hi, everyone. I'm James Cortez Rivera. I'm the watershed coordinator for the Upper San Gabriel River as part of the Safe Clean Water Program. In the next few slides, we'll expand on best practices for community engagement as outlined in the interim guidance. So we can really think about engagement as a matter of degree. And you see that conceptualized here. We see activities that inform and consult as good, activities that involve and educate as better, and activities that incorporate and partner with communities as best. Next slide. And the main reason we're sharing this information is because it's crucial to reflect and incorporate on these practices, right? And really at all phases of any project. Scoring for community engagement is a component of the Safe Clean Water program, but proposals should really not see the scoring as the only end goal. We need to think critically about engaging communities meaningfully. We need to value community expertise, and we need to figure out how to make the community a part of the project. And so what does meaningful engagement look like? We'll cover that in the next 3 slides. Here we label activities that inform and consult as good. So posting on social media and delivering presentations, those things provide information to the community. Other activities like focus groups, they seek to gather some community input, some viewpoints. Generally in these activities, there is interaction with the community, but it tends to be very unidirectional, right? So there is clearly room for improvement here. Next slide. On the other hand, we label activities that involve, educate, and teach as better. Here, activities that directly engage with the community, that try to understand why certain viewpoints exist, and those that comprehend the diverse histories and needs of communities are understood as better than a simple one-way communication. These can include workshops and forums where there is a dialogue, where there's a certain dialogue that's rendered possible. Next slide. Even better, however, and this is to conclude this section, are these activities that we label as best. In addition to the activities discussed in the past 2 slides, these activities that attempt to collaborate with communities, that actually incorporate knowledge from communities, and those that partner with communities are all activities that we should strive for. Doing so creates projects not just for communities, but projects for communities by communities. And that's really the key lesson. The best community engagement involves joining conversation. It involves collaboration and incorporation, and it requires having communities as decision makers. And I'll hand it back to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, watershed coordinators. We're so glad you could be here. And later, as they mentioned in the breakout rooms, you'll hopefully have an opportunity to chat with them as well. My name is Amanda Zeidner. I'm the project manager for community planning at Council for Watershed Health. Before we get started today, our team really wanted to start this portion of the presentation being grounded in the realities of the role of structural racism, in the role it's played in our built environment here in Los Angeles and across our country. When we talk about project opportunities and needs in environmentally stressed communities, we also need to recognize the history of racist policy and planning that has occurred within many Los Angeles communities. We're going to talk a lot about trust building today. And as we talk about building trust and working with trusted community leaders, we're also hoping that you're taking time to understand why in many environmentally stressed communities that trust is lacking when we talk about infrastructure. We also encourage you to watch the tribal allyship training that SBI held earlier in the year. A team member will put that link in the chat again for you. Next slide. So today we're going to talk about community outreach, education, and mostly community engagement. But before we get into that, I wanted to take a second to really make sure we're on the same page about what those terms mean, particularly when we talk about them in this presentation. So outreach, education, and engagement are often used really interchangeably, particularly in this work. And today, when we talk about outreach or education, often that looks like a one-way conversation. So a city or agency is the expert or the one with the information, and they are educating or giving outreach to the community. And it's really one way where the expertise is flowing in one direction. Education is similar, where it's a one-way conversation. The city or agency is educating a community about a technical topic or making sure they're informed about something in particular. With engagement, we're really talking about an ongoing two-way conversation where both parties, the city or agency and the community, are seen as experts in their own right and are both benefiting from that conversation and from the engagement that's taking place. So let's get into sort of what that can look like. This is the spectrum of public participation made by the International Association of Public Participation. And it's a really great example of, even when we're talking about that two-way conversation, that there is a spectrum within that. And as you see, the inform is a little bit less of that really like engaging community in the decision-making piece. And as we work towards empower on the right side, you're incorporating community voices into the final decision and putting that decision into the hands of the public. So as we talk through what community engagement is and some ways to do it, I really encourage you to think about how we can move towards empowerment when we're doing our community engagement. Next slide. So how does engagement work, or what are ways to effectively manage it? We really believe at Council for Watershed Health that community-based organizations are an essential role in the engagement process. So here you can see they can facilitate that two-way conversation and really be an integral part of connecting city and agencies with communities. And I want to be clear, when I talk about community-based organizations, I'm talking about hyper-local community groups that are really integrated and trusted by communities and have that existing membership and trust within a specific community. Next slide. When we talk about the role of CBOs and the role of community engagement within project work or water work or even water quality work, we're really specifying that engagement needs to happen at each of the stages of a project. So not only does it need to happen at the planning and design phase where you traditionally see some engagement happening, it needs to start before a project is even conceptualized, before it goes into a feasibility study. Community members and CBOs can play really important roles in making sure a project is going to be feasible before a feasibility study. And we're talking about engagement going through the construction phase as well and past O&M into a stewardship phase. So community members and engagement is necessary at every stage of the process. And we're going to hear a little bit later from some experts on what that can look like. Before we hear from some expert CBOs, I wanted to get a sense of who is in the room and your comfort levels with working with community-based organizations. So you can use this QR code, or you can go to slido.com and enter this code, but the poll will show up as you're using it. If you're struggling to work with Slido, you can also put your answers in the chat. Great, so it looks like a lot of you have. Okay. Thank you so much for participating. It's a really great opportunity, especially in this breakout rooms that we're going to do in a bit, to hear what your experiences have been and some of your own expertise. We really want to hear from that. But before, we're going to hear from Francisco and Dora, who are two CBO engagement experts in our region.
Hi, my name is Dora Fritz-Armenta. I'm the lead project planner at Pacoima Beautiful. So we're here at Paxton Park, but behind me is the Pacoima Wash. The Pacoima Wash is a tributary of the Los Angeles River, and there's many of them in Los Angeles County. This is one of the few that is here in the San Fernando Valley. And so this tributary behind me, this wash, separates a few communities. It separates Pacoima and it separates San Fernando, the city of San Fernando. Prior to this pedestrian bridge here, there wasn't as much connectivity for pedestrians and for the high school students that go to San Fernando High School. And so the pedestrian bridge that exists here really helped with the connectivity issues. However, Pacoima and just this area of Los Angeles County has very little park and open space. And so Our vision for the Pacoima Wash was to eventually create and build out this beautiful park space on the embankments of the wash. There are many, many, many other communities that have parks along the wash, along their tributaries, and we wanted to see something similar here in Pacoima. So Pacoima Beautiful has over 25 years of experience here in Pacoima now. So we are definitely known as one of the only environmental justice organizations in the San Fernando Valley. And so I think with that reputation, city agencies have reached out to us, knowing that we have a close connection to residents here. So whenever a city agency is maybe looking to do some kind of project here, as they have done in the past, like a stormwater infrastructure project, they reached out to us because we were the organization that had identified that place as a potential pocket park. And so they're like, oh, these are the people we need to talk to if we want to include the voice of residents and of the neighborhood.
Hi, my name is Francisco Romero. I'm with Promesa Boyle Heights. Here today we're at Salazar Park. Ruben F. Salazar Park is a really important park in the community. It has a historical significance. About 52 years ago, there was a massive peace demonstration against the Vietnam War. We're talking about nearly 30,000 people that marched through the community here. The actual action ended here at the park. And just imagine a day full of presentations, poetry, music, food, political kind of speeches that ended tragically with the deaths of several people, including Ruben Salazar, who at the time was a journalist. Down the block here, you'll see a plaque that kind of commemorates the incident and what occurred. And so there's a lot more connection we have here to the park as far as programs and activities for many years. But the park work is part of the work that we do around healthy environments. For the last 5 years, we've been working with the County of Los Angeles on this engagement kind of process for this particular park. We now have been put onto their radar as a community organization that they can go to, right? And ask, hey, who do you think we could work in this area? Who do you think we could work in this area? Are you able to help us in this other area? As a matter of fact, we're already working on another project just on the other side of the hill here, where we're going to be doing the same process. But we know the organizations that work there, right? Because our particular organization doesn't work specifically in that community. But because we are collaborative, we know the organizations there. We reached out to them and said, hey, we're going to be doing some engagement. Can we rely on you to help us, do some of the support with that outreach? They're like, yes, let's go. This is our community, and we're ready, right? So that network of organizations that work with each other, if once you start to get to know us, you do then have a list of resources for your agencies, right? Whether you're county, city, or otherwise. Through that whole process, and because we've learned, kind of the elements of what multi-benefit projects are and all that, we have been providing training for residents so they could speak to those issues while they're doing outreach. And so, we have now what we call community experts in the area. Now that has linked us to the city of Los Angeles. We're now in the process of the applications have gone in, but there's also continued engagement. There was previous engagement for the last 2 years for Hollenbach Park, the lake restoration. And that's the largest park in Boyle Heights. So we see that those kind of connections are formed when you are contacting us and sitting down with us and visiting us, right? Those are those things, and actually us visiting you. We've gone to the county offices, we've gone to the city offices. So it's that real, tight kind of connection and communication that helps projects, be more successful, be more competitive. It's a competitive grant. So it's exciting to see, this shift, and county and city entities really looking at engagement as something that is higher up in the level in their application or development process, where whereas before it really did feel like it was like a second secondhand thought, you know.
Hi, my name is Dora Fritz-Armenta. I'm the lead project planner at
Welcome back, everyone. We're so lucky to hear from Dora and Francisco and hear some of their expertise. And we're going to hear a little bit more from them in a bit. But before we do, I wanted to share a few examples of engagement events. So we've talked a bit about what engagement is, how to engage with CBOs, but what does it actually look like? How can it be applied? And these are just a few examples that we've seen work really well in the region, but certainly not the only ones. And I also really want to preface this with sharing that accessibility is so important when we're planning and creating engagement events. So thinking about accessibility around language, around the physical environment that something is held in, the time it's held in, things like food and childcare are all things to really consider when you're planning an engagement event. So the first example is community walking tours. We have a few members I've seen from API Forward Movement in the house. Thanks for being here. And here you'll see one of their walking tours in Alhambra. Walking tours are a great way to walk a physical space next to community members and get to hear about their lived experience in that space, what they see on a day-to-day basis or season-to-season basis, and really get some of that knowledge about what they'd like to see in a built space. On the right, you'll see a Place It workshop. We're so lucky in this region to have expert community engagement practitioners such as James Rojas, who does Place It workshops, which are a really creative way to think about, have community members really think about their built environment and think creatively about what they'd like to see in their built environment and do some problem solving. Next slide. On the left, you'll see Active SGV's street activation. I'm not going to talk too much about it because we're going to hear from David and Renee later about that project, but placemaking can be a really great way to show community members what a space could be. And so being able to create a bike lane in a street that doesn't have one yet, or create a play structure in a place that hasn't been a park yet is a really cool way to engage community members and garner excitement about a project. On the right, API Forward Movement again, tabling at popular community events. Tabling is a really common engagement activity, but we encourage you to take a lesson from API Forward Movement and think about how you can gain expertise as a city or agency or organization when tabling. So here you see they're asking what community members want to see in their neighborhood and really getting data from a tabling event. We also encourage you to think about what is a best location for tabling. Make sure you're going to events that community members are already going to. So this was the 626 event in Alhambra that saw thousands of people within one day, or going to places community members just already are going in their day-to-day lives, such as the grocery store, or maybe there's a bustling main street to your town. Whatever that looks like, really trying to meet community members where they're at. Next slide. And lastly, we have design charrettes, which when we talk about incorporating community members into the design process and allowing them to truly be a part of the design process and problem solve and create their own designs and really engage in a creative way in the design process through a design charrette is so important and is a much better model for doing community engagement than having folks vote on which design they like best or sort of checking boxes in a survey. And on the right, you see platicas or community conversations. Trust building is such an important part of a project and community engagement. And given projects last so long and can be really drawn out processes, allowing spaces for community conversation and for community members to get to know who's working on a project can also be important. And here you'll see it's even possible over Zoom. So I know we're all trying to navigate what community engagement looks like through COVID and through sort of navigating what's happened with the pandemic. So even Zoom is an option, which is cool. With that, let's go back to Dora and Francisco and hear a little bit more.
Community engagement to Pacoima Beautiful is really a partnership. We understand that residents and community members in Pacoima know what's best for them. They know what they need in their community. They know what they need more access or resources to, and community engagement is just including them as part of that conversation. It's including them in the conversation of what the design of the wash would look like, some of the challenges that they see here already, and how we can possibly address them with the design of the wash. Community engagement is really about ensuring that residents and the people that are going to be most impacted by this project have first say in what they want it to look like. We understand and we recognize that the tribal members were the first peoples here in this particular area of Los Angeles, and we thought it was absolutely necessary to include their voice in the vision and the design of the wash.
You know, here we're on Tongva indigenous people land. So, you know, we can't start talking about the park just from like 1970 or even 100 years ago. You know, the history of the land here is connected to the indigenous people here, right? Many families here are indigenous people from Mexico. They're, you know, from Chiapas, Guerrero, Oaxaca, you know, central Mexico. But the folks, the stewards of the land that have been here for centuries are the Tongva people. So the elements of information to be included here must include some engagement from the beginning with the Tongva people. So we hope we as allies, you know, we're going to ensure that we always bring that up and make that connection. The first step, or the mid-level step of consulting, gets community ideas for projects that you may not have been thinking about or may not have been considering, as far as, like, you know, things that are important in the community, like, you know, like cultural kind of historical markers, or like even things such as trees, right? Like there's certain trees that the families are like, hey, this tree we never wanted to go.
We want to make sure that whenever we choose the trees, the amenities, the walkways, any aspect of that community is here to tell us, hey, that might actually not go very well because we have X, you know, Y issues here. Or, you know, we actually want to see more amenities for children because there's a lot of, you know, here at Paxton Park, we have the baseball fields, but maybe they don't have any play areas for kids. And so whenever we reach out to community members, we ask for their opinion, we ask for their feedback, it's really asking for their expertise. As you know, some residents have lived here decades, 20, 30, 40 years. And so they know what happens every season here, what happens during baseball season, what happens during fall season and during the rainy season with the wash. And so they would be best equipped to tell us what this space would need when it's built out. I think some of the challenges with any community engagement project is that depending on the community that you're working with, there might be some other issues that residents want to raise, and completely, you know, validly, because some of these, like many planning issues, a lot of these things intersect, right? So if you're talking about parks and open space, you might also be talking about unhoused folks. If you're talking about water infrastructure projects, you might also be talking about some areas in the community that haven't been taken care of for a very long time. If you're talking about new streets, you might be talking about sidewalks and accessibility. And so sometimes one of the challenges is letting folks know that the topic we're talking about at that particular meeting is for a specific goal and a specific vision. But I do think it's really important to listen to community members and their experience as well, because while it might not be 100% applicable to that very thing that you're talking about, I do think it's insightful to their experience, their user and resident experience in that area.
At this edge of the park, right, what was going on was the county had a certain idea of how they thought it could look. And part of it involved removing a lot of the trees. So when the families spoke up in one of the engagement circles or activities, event, they made sure that they said that. And so then the county went back to the drawing board, right? They took they took that information, just that piece of information as an example, because there was others, and redesigned the project kind of look, and the how it was going to be built, where things were going to be. Another thing that came up in that discussion was safety. Several vehicles have already come up onto the park, right? When they've crashed, come up, and unfortunately, folks have been injured, and I believe there was even like one death. So the families brought that up as well. So in this corner now, part of the design considerations is going to be putting some safety features along this very busy street to reduce the possibilities of vehicles being able to shoot up and come up onto here, which includes actually removing, not taking them away, but just moving them to another location, the exercise equipment in this corner. The exercise equipment in that corner is going to now be kind of spread out throughout the park to also activate the park, which was something that came up with the families around, how can we activate and get more people to kind of walk around the park?
So I think one of the things that community feedback has really provided in the projects that we've done has been to create multi-purpose projects that not only benefit the climate and the environment, but also the people that will be using the space. We recognize that we're in a time with climate change that I feel like there's nothing that can be a single-use project anymore. So a park can no longer just be a park, right? I think with a lot of things that California is doing is trying to incorporate ways to capture stormwater and to mitigate heat in urban areas. And so through our community engagement, we have found ways to not only bring these huge green infrastructure projects into our community, but also to include the user experience. So include the residents' perspective so that above the park and above the stormwater project, you also have space for community to gather, for community to find a place of respite during hot summer months, or whenever they want to hang out with their kids outside.
We got a multiple kind of points of voices into like what they would like to see, including the sports section, right? The basketball, the tennis courts. Some folks say, hey, let's remove the tennis courts, but there's actually a tennis program here, and that's like, let's make sure we keep that intact. But also the baseball fields, right? Like the baseball fields, they've been always, there's a problem with flooding when the rain comes down. So there's going to be some elements that are going to help reduce that flooding. All of that came through this process of an example of what we call deep, committed, culturally competent engagement. And that is dedicated. And by dedicated, we mean there was resources. The county actually subcontracted our organization to support us to make sure we had staff time to help get the word out, including giving a certain amount to the actual resident leaders that were doing a lot of the outreach.
Community engagement.
Welcome back, everybody. Francisco and Dora are such a wealth of knowledge, and we hope that sort of gave some applied examples of what that community engagement work that we've talked about previously can really look like, and how CBOs can play that integral role of supporting deep, culturally competent engagement. Our next section is going to be the how to budget and fundraise for engagement. But before we get into it, I wanted to do another poll and see, is funding a barrier to community engagement for your city or agency? So if you're new to Slido, you can use the QR code with your phone, or you can go to slido.com and enter in that number to participate. If you're struggling with that, feel free to also just put it in the chat. Great, getting some responses. Yes, and sometimes rising to the top. That makes sense. That's something that we hear a lot in this work, which is why we wanted to cover it a bit. And I'll preface that by saying that one of the examples I'm about to share, we're going to hear a lot more after the breakout room from the city of South El Monte and Active SGV. So buckle in for that. It'll be a really great opportunity to learn from a city and agency and CBO that have worked together and we're really able to find funding to do the right kind of engagement for a project. Thank you for participating in that. Let's go to the next slide. So the trust building process with CBOs should include working together on budgets. And this can look like writing applications together that include line items for CBOs to work on engagement. So here you can see along the process from needs assessment and feasibility study all the way through O&M and stewardship, there is a role for CBOs to play, and there needs to be funding for them to be able to play that role. Community engagement and CPO participation need to be a consistent through line in the budget of a project all the way through operations and maintenance or stewardship. There isn't one solution to funding engagement, but often funders support project applicants with strategies that build engagement into budgets. And CBOs can also help meet with funders and inform rates, scope, and level of effort. So CBOs are their own expert in fundraising. Engagement is the work they do, whether it's with you on a project or on their own work. So they understand that process as well, and can really be an expert in their own right with the application process and with working with funders. Next slide. The Spain Park project is an example that we wanted to highlight. This was through the Safe Clean Water program, and the city of Paramount included around $100,000 for public outreach efforts with their project. And two things we wanted to point out. While they do say outreach, a lot of the descriptions of what that looks like true engagement. So we're really hopeful that that authentic engagement will happen with this project. But most notably, the Safe Clean Water program funded this project, including that amount of engagement. So as we're talking about funders really supporting the engagement efforts or the write-ins for engagement in a project, we're seeing that happen with the Safe Clean Water program, which is really exciting. Next slide. So I'm going to be brief here, but Merced Avenue Greenway is another great example. Here, Active SGV and the city of South El Monte were able to collaborate on grant writing and write Active SGV into their feasibility study for the Merced Avenue Greenway. And like I said, we'll hear a lot more about that later on. Next slide. So that partnership actually was a major key to success for funding Merced Avenue Greenway and led to all of these different pots of funding being brought to the table because there were resources set aside for engagement and also set aside for collaborating on that grant writing, which is why it's so exciting to be able to hear from that team later on. So we're going to head into breakout rooms now because we're really wanting to prioritize space for you all as experts in your own right to share what's going on with your cities and agencies and also get to know each other a bit. And when we get back, we'll hear a lot more about the Merced Avenue Greenway project. right, I see my group. Welcome back to the main room. People should be joining us soon. Welcome back, everyone. I felt this way like every time. I always could use more time and like had such a great discussion. So
Can I just jump in really quickly? We had two watershed coordinators in our breakout group, which was great. I know some folks joined late. So if our watershed coordinators could reshare their emails in the chat, that would be great. So our folks can connect with you after the meeting. Thanks, Minda.
right, great. Definitely do that. I wanted to just thank you all for sharing your own experiences and expertise that like makes this even a stronger workshop and hopefully has led to some more learning. And I want to pass it off to Drew Reedy, who's going to introduce our panelists.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. And I just concur that we could have used another 20 minutes, as has been the case in all of these workshops. One thing that came up for me today is just, some really great connections being made. And I think what we'll do to help facilitate along those lines is send out a contact list, at least where we have emails for those that have been a part of these workshops, so that you all can connect with each other moving forward. But we do need to move on. We've got about 45 minutes left. Thanks for sticking through it. We're gonna start this next session with a case study about a project that we really feel has been exceptional in their community engagement works. There are projects like this throughout the region, and even throughout the Upper San Gabriel River. It's hard to pick one, but this one stood out for a lot of reasons. And so I want to welcome our next two speakers, Renee Salas, who currently works for the city of South El Monte and has served as Public Works Director, Community Development Director, Deputy City Manager, and now Interim City Manager. Prior to Renee's public sector career, he worked in the private sector for Southern California Gas and Sempra Energy International. And while at Sempra Energy International, Renee worked in Uruguay for 2 years on a natural gas pipeline project and distribution infrastructure with partners from Spain and Argentina, as well as David Diaz, who's a public health professional offering extensive and successful experience in planning and developing community-based initiatives throughout greater LA County. David's been a dedicated public servant and advocate that has successfully worked with youth, schools, businesses, nonprofits, and cities to advance environmental justice, equity, and community development. David's currently the executive director of Active San Gabriel Valley and serves on the Measure A Oversight Committee, Metro San Gabriel Valley Service Control, Measure W Scoring Committee. He didn't list this one, but I know he's on the Upper San Gabriel River Watershed Area Steering Committee, as well as the board of El Monte Union High School. I don't see David up here yet, which means he'll be joining us soon. But Renee, I think you're getting us started on this next set of slides. Welcome, Renee.
Yes. Thank you, Drew, and I'm really happy to be here. As Drew said, I've had all those titles, and now I'm the interim city manager. I've been with the city for 5 years. And just a background, this project started a year before I was hired in 2017. And that was just to get it started with hiring the consultants to start putting stuff together for outreach, hiring of other consultants, and also going after money too. And that's very big and very important for a project this size. So as you can see, the history, it's not just one person putting this together. It's partnerships with everyone, elected officials, municipalities, partnering with other agencies, schools, and community members. We have a school nearby that is important to us, so we have to look at transportation needs and crosswalks along Merced Boulevard. And you'll see in a map, Merced is actually two communities. We have the residential side to the south of Rush, and north is more warehousing. And the focus was, because of funding, we wanted to separate those two and focus first on getting funding for the residential side, and you'll see that later. And of course, we had these partners, Active SGV, which is a big partner with us on this project and others as well. Day one, and of course, Council for Watershed Health is very instrumental. We hired them on in the beginning, and they're still with us trying to get more funding, and we appreciate that. And also the Water Foundation. Next slide. So again, the focus, to try to get more money is we need to make a connection with the water. And how do you make a connection with water when it's a street project? Well, it's you try to infiltrate the water from rain into the ground basin, into the aquifer, instead of running it out into the ocean. And that's a key point, because there's funding out there to do those water capturing devices, because water impacts everybody. And also adding the transit component, which is a bike lane, super important too, to go after funding. Water conservation, greening, of course, trees, putting trees out there is important. And safety, as I mentioned earlier, safety is definitely something that is important for a project this size, for the community and for the school nearby. One of the comments that we got from people in the community is the street is just way too fast. People speeding down it. It's a neighborhood street. You got big trucks coming down it. It's a neighborhood street. But that's one key thing that we touched upon. And in the design, what we did was narrow the street, turn it from 2 lanes to 1 lane, going either way. Next slide. So you can see funding is important. And for those aspects that I mentioned, touching on bike lanes, touching on water, we're very successful in getting a lot of different grants for this project. They're listed here, Prop 1, Prop 68, Caltrans. We also have California Conservation and San Gabriel Rivers and Mountains. And also locally, we have money from Measure W and Measure A and Measure M. So all in all, we're just to let you know, we're at the initial estimates where this project was going to be $9 million. This is just for the first phase. When we actually went out to bid, due to COVID and construction costs increasing, it actually came out to $11 million. So from 9 million to 11 million. So that's our gap that we're trying to shorten and go after more funding, touching on our existing providers of funding to see if they can raise the money that we've already gotten, knowing that it's a very important project to our community. So, and Council for Watershed Help is helping us do that effort. So thank you very much, Council for Watershed Health. Next slide, please. So again, and just to touch base, and David's going to touch more about outreach and a few more slides later, but it's important to do the engagement early on. Very important. And this is a trenched neighborhood with families that lived here for years. They're used to different things. They're used to seeing things similar, but they're open to changes. They're open to bike lanes. People already bike on this street to get from one point to another. So having that outreach component early on is very important. Next slide, please. So you can see from this map, you see the location in red, the red just below Rush Street. That's the neighborhood part that we're focusing on first. And then the next part is the dashed one that's still in the planning phase. We're still trying to get some extra money for that to complete and go after funding. And it's about the total length just over a mile. And it is a wide street in our community. And we have a few of those that look more like a arterial, but it's more like a neighborhood street. Next slide. This is the current condition. You see the industrial corridor, which is north of Rush that I mentioned. And then you see the residential corridor, which is south of Rush. This is what the current situation looks like now. And as you can see, there's north of Rush that is already industrial warehouse manufacturing area. And the one below that on Rush is residential. Next slide. And here are the conditions. You can see there's a hodgepodge of the sidewalk conditions that we're going to take care of. You can see there's some access issues right now that we need to take care of. Some areas we don't have sidewalks, others you do, but it's an issue for ADA that we need to address. So this is an idea of some of these intersections and crossing areas as well. Next slide. And again, here's the neighborhood. And this is south of Rush. And it's all pretty much residential. The area where you see 412 on the left side, that's actually a mobile home park. And it's a lot of people compact in one area. We did outreach, Active SGV did great outreach to everybody, including the mobile home park, to make sure that they're included. You know, most of them are renters and there seems to be a disconnect. There's also a lot of families that are Hispanic, some undocumented. So the outreach had to be important to have a Spanish component and communicate with them and do the outreach. Sometimes we would knock on the doors and we knew there was people inside, but they did not want to come out. And so it was difficult. We had to work with the property manager to spread the word that we're here to look at the street only. Next slide. So as you can see, the project history, technical assistance, we definitely had the assistance of Watershed Health, which is very important. They were helping us with grants and writing grants. I still remember times with the staff from Watershed Health staying up late, trying to put these grants together to the California Conservancy and the San Gabriel Valley water, what was it? The Rivers and Mountains Conservancy as well. And it was great. And we were fortunate to get those grants. Active SGV, you can't go wrong with an organization like Active SGV. You cannot early on get them out there, do their outreach, and also with Climate Resolve, do the surveys and getting comments. And I've assisted with that. And it was, for me as a public works director, and also as a community development director, doing the outreach and still doing it with them, with Active SGV on other projects, get to know the residents, get to know the businesses, and you find out more about what their concerns are, not just for the streets, but also for crime, conditions of accessibility with county services, that type of stuff. And, you know, Merced is just the beginning, as I mentioned. For us, we're looking at Rosemead, we're looking at Rush Street, we're also looking at Santa Anita, and we're in the process of various stages of that right now. Next slide. And again, you've seen this slide that Amanda showed as well. It's very important to keep the engagement going, not just for design, not conception, design, and construction. It's very important, especially with the neighborhood and also industrial warehousing. You need to put together a timeline. You need to let them know when contractors are going to be disturbing the street. What are the options for transportation, getting to freeways, getting to their jobs. So we don't want to isolate people. We want them part of that process and keep the communications open. Next slide. So here's just one of the renditions that were proposed for this part of Rush Street to the south, and then you see Rush Street to the north. It was very important to the community to maintain a turning lane in the middle. And so that's one thing that came out of the conversations and the outreaches that they had. And David will expand more on that. But from the aspect and eyes of represented folks like our council, these types of diagrams are very important. They understand these types of diagrams. It gives them a better picture of what's to come and what the impacts are. Next slide. So I'll give it away to David now.
Thanks, Renee. And just a shout out to Renee. He's one of the only city managers that I know, or even when he started public works director, is now city manager, that has gone door to door canvassing with us multiple times, not just for Merced Avenue multiple times, but also for our Rush Street project. So just shout out to you, Renee, for all the work that you've done, and appreciate your leadership over at the city of South El Monte. Hope I'm still here.
Thanks, Dave.
Screen that off. So for us, it's in the city of South El Monte. I think for us, we're a place-based organization, environmental justice and public health nonprofit that's headquartered out of El Monte, but most of our work focuses exclusively on Eastern Los Angeles County, so the San Gabriel Valley. Most of the folks that work at Active San Gabriel Valley are either residents or have roots in the region. And I myself am a longtime South El Monte resident, now El Monte resident. And so we have great affinity towards the people, the area, the community there. And so it's really important that, we have what's considered non-traditional planning, whereas like a city just develops a plan and then, tells you this is the plan, please respond to it. No changes are made. We wanted to start from how can we have a community identified concept to really drive and co-develop solutions for what that looks like. So in one of the slides you saw, it started as far back as 2010. And so that was actually also, there was a bike SUV then, now an active SUV person involved in that effort as well, that then led to the regional bicycle master plan, which included the city of South El Monte, and it had also identified Merced Avenue. And so really it was about 5 to 6 years of building on existing work for us to get to Merced Avenue and a more intensive design process to really get a community-driven design option for folks. And so for y'all that are not familiar with the city of South El Monte, about 22,000 residents live there. However, because it is heavy industrial, more than 40,000 folks are in the city during the day. We have some, 0.7 acres per 1,000 residents, so very park poor. County Viral Screen 4.0, 90th percentile and above in terms of pollution burden, social determinants of health, socioeconomic status, traffic violence, lack of tree canopy. And so some of the highest childhood obesity and adult obesity that you will see in all of LA County. And so for us, it's really important to be able to maximize limited dollars to have multiple benefits. And really, that's what we see for Merced Avenue. It's an opportunity for us to address multiple needs of the community: public safety, public health, access, air quality, active recreation, connectivity to destinations. And so for us, it was really important to be able to co-develop solutions that were a design that was going to work for community members. And so we did a number of outreach and engagement activities to really try and solicit quality input and feedback from folks. And so lots of community tabling or pop-ups that occurred during that period in time. We also took the city of South El Monte City Council out to Santa Ana to explore on bikes what neighborhood greenways look like, both on street and off street. And so we were able to coordinate that with the city council and some of the commissioners and residents that were interested in attending, because if you don't have exposure or you haven't gone to these respective communities or haven't experienced infrastructure, it's a diagram.
Good, thank you.
Someone's talking. A diagram, you can get kind of a look for it and kind of imagine it, but it's better to experience it. And so we were able to take commissioners and City of South El Monte council members over to Santa Ana on a bike tour. We also did numerous rounds of community canvassing, not just for the initial period where we were informing people or capturing people's input and attitudes around climate, public health, public safety, but also later after the workshops, after the second workshop and people had a design, selected design preference or we had a more robust design. We actually went door to door back in the respective neighborhood to get their preferred design preference. And so this was you had a couple options. People were able to select which option. We were able to jot down which other comments or concerns that they may have had. And different in that, usually you just have that one workshop or that one event where you come to or attend, and it's kind of a little bit fixed, it's static. But we, not only conducted the door-to-door engagement to get people's input and feedback that weren't able to attend the workshop, but we also coordinated a workshop and demo, a pop-up demo of what it would look like on Merced if you experience some of the proposed improvements. And so we'll see that, a couple pictures of that in a little bit. We also engaged with the local youth at South El Monte High School. We conducted city council presentations, and then we focused on doing some mailers and also some banners to make sure that there was visibility around the project. And the picture just below there's actually a photo of one of the bike audits. So the city of South El Monte in the summer host community bike rides the first Saturdays. And so what we did is actually we collaborated with the city of South El Monte, and we hosted a community bike ride where, we were able to go with people who bike along Merced Avenue, and then stop and reflect on what improvements or could be made, what is missing, what are some opportunities. And so we had this qualitative and quantitative feedback that was presented by the community members. Similarly, we did this walk audit along Merced Avenue to get input and feedback. One of the things that we asked folks to do is to look for the number of trees in the public right of way. And, unfortunately, there aren't any right now. And so I'm really happy for the future where it's going to have, dozens of trees planted along the north and south of Merced Avenue, where we'll have good tree canopy. So again, our idea is to co-develop and identify solutions with community, to be able to develop a community-driven design that's going to meet the need for folks. You may have experienced this in your own city, but there's a lot of bike lash, right? Around why are you, reconfiguring the road? And what we wanted to do is to make sure to have candid conversations with community members to get everyone's input and feedback, especially the folks that lived on Merced Avenue and surrounding areas, to make sure that one, that they were aware of the project, and two, to make sure that we were able to get their input and feedback. And there was overwhelming support for the project. So that was critical to the success of the design that was ultimately approved. So if you want to go ahead and hit the next couple slides, Amanda. So yeah, here's a picture of the community pop-up. So again, we took some planters, some vegetation, 10 by 10, 10 by 20 canopies, and we brought some bikes out for folks. We created a protected bikeway for people to be able to experience what it would feel like to ride your bike on the street. Everyone from 5, 6 years old all the way to 80 plus were able to ride on the street safely, protected from traffic. And then after they came out, or after they finished the stretch that was protected bikeway, they were to come out and take an experience survey of how they felt while riding. Go ahead and hit the next slide. And so see here, they're selecting the preferred design option for which one they like the best. Go ahead and hit the next slide. This is one of my favorite things here, children riding safely on a protected bikeway with the planners, because again, this is kind of like the demonstration is the engagement, right? People often say well, we've heard, this won't work here for this many reasons, but it's nothing like doing a live demonstration or experiment on the street to get people's input and feedback about what it really feels like. So this was a tremendously successful event. We, organized food for folk, raffle prizes. We had free bike rentals, helmets, as you see the kids wearing here. And then we kind of just hung out along the green space on Merced Avenue. Okay, then go ahead and hit the next slide. And then this is part of our bike manual pedestrian counts, manual pedestrian and bike counts. So we had folks that would actually Tuesdays and Thursdays, 7 to 9 a.m. and then the afternoons, 4 to 6 p.m. count how many folks were riding bikes or walking or on a wheelchair or any other type of use, skateboard, scooter, that were using the street. Because again, one of the comments that we often get is, well, no one rides their bikes here, right? And so we want to make sure that we capture that data so it was reflective of the input and input for the design. Go ahead to the next slide. And then here's one of the beautiful design renderings. So here, one of the things that's really cool about it is that people were saying that we should create an at grade, so same level as a sidewalk, bikeway or multi-use path, because people were already riding their bikes on the sidewalk. And so for most cities, it is a crime to ride your bike on the sidewalk. Legally, you have to abide by the California Vehicle Code, and that requires you to ride your bike as if you were driving a car. So all traffic laws apply here. And so riding your bike on the sidewalk obviously is not in compliance with that, but community felt, people are already riding their bike on the sidewalk. Why don't we just extend the sidewalk, create a multi-use path, create a path for people that are walking, skating or scooting, and then one separately for people that are biking. And so that's the design that folks selected the most. And so that's why that one's the preferred design choice. Go hit the next slide. Here's just another look at it. As you see, again, we're meeting the multiple benefits, some of the traffic calming elements here. You can see the bulb outs, the beautiful vegetation, the urban canopy that's being introduced here. If you saw the before existing conditions slide that they showed after just a few minutes ago, you would see that none of this vegetation or urban canopy is currently present. Go ahead to the next slide. And then here's just an image to show you, kind of like the multiple benefits and how it would all be laid out on Merced Avenue. One of the really other cool things, again, is that this will connect to Purple Pipe, I believe, that's just located on Rush and Merced. And so again, this idea that with finite dollars, we're maximizing the dollars that we're receiving to be able to meet multiple needs of the community. And so I'm really excited about, the project development part of this. Unfortunately, it's taken us a really long time, right? All the way from 2010 till 2012, and maybe construction can start and finish within the next 4 to 5 years. I think it's a really long time for project development, but nevertheless, I think what we have here is like something that's truly been informed by community, developed by community, and ultimately like is going to build stewardship and ownership of this street. So really excited for when that day comes that we're able to, one, put a shovel in the ground, and then two, the kind of opening ceremony of this greenway. So, and I think that's this is my last slide. So go ahead to the next one, Amanda. Yes, so questions.
Great. Thank you, David and Renee. And just looking at the chat here where Dorothy Wong put it succinctly but perfectly. Beautiful work. Great project. Can't wait to see this built. And I think we have lots of questions and points to this potentially providing a model for the region and moving forward for Green Street projects like this, complete street projects like this. And maybe I'll start with this first question that I received via chat. And it's for David. Can you share with us what active SGV strategies within the budgeting process helped you determine the scope and the kind of needed budget and timeline for the different strategies of engagement? Big question.
Yeah, I think one of the important parts is that unlike other traditional models where a budget has already been defined and scoped for you and then you submit a bid, what we were able to do is work with the city of South El Monte. And when I say we, I mean the Council for Watershed Health, Climate Resolve, Active SGV, and to think through all the design elements as well as the outreach and engagement that would be necessary for the project to then develop a scope and budget that was appropriate for the activities that were being proposed. And so I think that's really helpful whenever we're able to inform the scope to then determine an applicable budget. So some things that we consider as like overall award, right? Term, how many months or how many months, and how many months. We want to make sure it was iterative engagement, so it wasn't just going to be like the first 6 months and then active SGV wasn't going to be involved anymore, right? We want to make sure that we were involved through the whole process. And then any ideas around like organized opposition, that's a good one to consider. And then some of the other work that's happening. So can we leverage other worker efforts? And I think For us, one of the big benefits of working with a community-based organization in your community or in your area, unlike maybe consulting groups, is that we're going to be here after the project is gone, and we're going to be probably working in your community on other things, you know. And so for us, it's really, we've continued to work with the city of South El Monte. So we, as Renee mentioned, we were working with them on Rush Street, Rosemead Boulevard, hopefully Santa Anita as well. We've done an open streets program now twice with the city of South El Monte. We're rolling out a bike share in the community as well. And so, you know, we're really invested in making sure that we have this iterative community engagement, and we've also done COVID-19 vaccination. So like, it's really the same community members that go to these other events will also be in connection or relation with you for like the projects that we're working on. And so I think it's a good strategy to involve your partners early. That way you're able to have this discussion on what's needed, what is the scope, how much do we have available to budget, what is our goal with the engagement.
Great, and it brings up a point from my breakout group where one of the members suggested a kind of a one-pager on a case study like Merced, where the timeline could be shared, the budget and details, so that they can learn from examples that have these longer project timelines. So maybe there's some potential for sharing kind of a one-pager on how this project worked and where the successes and challenges were. And so council might be following up with you both on that one. Denise shared, and I'll just open this up to either of you. Actually, I'm going to jump up to a different question, come back to that one later. But a question was asked in the chat, I believe by Maritza. Has outreach been made to the original peoples of these territories, such as the Gabrielino, Tongva, indigenous communities? If not, what guidance or resources would need to engage in this work? Would you need to engage in this work?
Yeah, for this project, not directly. Through a collaborative South El Monte Arts Posse, we actually did conduct a series of bike rides, tours, and kind of talks around the history of El Monte, South El Monte, specific to like murals. And so one of the Tongva elders, Gabriel in our area, is someone that we've worked with in the past for other initiatives, but for this project, we didn't engage them directly for this project. But I think anytime that we do green elements, you know, recognition of the land, having like signage, interpretive signage, that's really important. I know I've seen it through Amigos de los Rios' work, where they've included some of that signage and education at some of their park projects.
And just to touch on the construction side, because this will involve excavation in putting in the infrastructure, there is a component as part of the RFP process for hiring the consultant or the construction company to do it, the contractor, to engage with indigenous populations whenever they're disturbing any ground construction in the area, because this area was populated by indigenous people, and we want to make sure we are sensitive to that as well during the construction process.
Thank you, Renee and Maritza. Feel free to add any follow-ups to the chat here. I'm going to get into a couple of nuts and bolts details, maybe for Renee here. Denise shared, our agency is very small and doesn't have the budget for a grant writer. Are there any resources available that could assist in gaining access to funds from these propositions and measures?
You know, we used our general fund, I believe, no, or did we get a grant? I think we got part of a grant to hire the consultant to do the work. And that was hiring the Council for Watershed Health. And I believe it was a state grant that helped us with that. And it's important to try to reach, because we don't have a lot of funding. We're a small city too. And they were very instrumental in getting those grants for us for the planning and design and now construction. And because we don't have the staffing, we don't have a grant writer either. But within, the consultant can't just do it all by themselves. Of course, they have to work with city staff and also the contractors that we hire to put those grants together, because cost estimates have to be put together, engineering estimates have to be put together. So yeah, I feel their pain. It is challenging.
Great, thank you, Renee. And I know Climate Resolve is another community-based
Yes.
organization or non-governmental organization that's been involved in this project. Okay, here's another one for you. Coming from me, actually, as an arborist and urban forester, I'm always interested in questions around trees. And maybe this is for both of you, actually. Are any of your constituents, through your community engagement efforts, being engaged around tree selection? Not just the number of trees, but what types of trees, and how's that playing into some of the design considerations? I know the landscape architecture team isn't here with us today, but anything you can contribute along those lines?
Yeah, I think it's important to do that engagement, not just for trees, but the foliage around some of those bulb outs, definitely important to get their buy-in. Of course, we want drought tolerant trees. We want trees that make sense, that would grow and not disturb the infrastructure. We don't want ficuses that are extremely difficult to maintain and are obstructive to private property and the sidewalk. So we need to make the right choice, and we will have some type of a selection, and just to let them know what will be in there. And we definitely want some kind of coverage, so that during the summertime we can lower the temperature in this neighborhood, because that's important. And so definitely engaging the public, we will do that.
Great, and just back to that last question, David and Renee, I'd encourage you to read the chat. Rita had a follow-up that isn't so much a question, but probably something good for your team to consider. Thank you, Maritza, for providing that. Yeah, Rihanna Fossum asked the following: thanks so much for sharing. For projects with long timelines like this, how do you keep up momentum and enthusiasm?
Well, for me, I have a lot of energy. I wake up early. I get to work at 6:30. I leave at 6:30, sometimes later. I don't drink coffee, so I don't know how that happens. I just have the enthusiasm, because we're such a small city. We all wear different hats. I still do a lot of other functions beside interim city manager. It comes with the territory. You have to get involved. You can't just sit in the office. You have to go out in the community. You have to engage the community. You have to get feedback from them, and share and keep talking about the project in conversations with other agencies that you have or other peers that you have. I'm part of the San Gabriel Valley Technical Advisory Committee for Public Works and Planning. So it's important to engage in your peers from other cities about your project. Other ideas come up that way. So I just want to have the best for my city and try to find the resources available. And it's time consuming, but we're at a point where it's coming to a closure and starting period for the construction. So we're very happy and proud and excited about that.
Great. And Renee, I'm going to point you to a question in the chat from Denise that we don't need to answer here, but question about life expectancy and weight allowances on permeable pavement. But I do want to thank you both for your time today. And for those that are willing to come off video or to come onto video and thank these two with me and give them a round of applause. David and Renee, you've both been at the forefront of green infrastructure in recent years, and we really congratulate you and look forward to learning from this project and others moving forward. I do want to hand it back over, but before I do, I'm hoping that Renee and David, if you might provide your emails in the chat so that those folks that want to connect with you can. Again, we'll be sending out a master email list. So if you don't jot it down now, don't worry about it. We'll send a contact list out later to everybody. Again, thank you both for being here today. And I'm going to hand it off to Amanda.
Thank you, Drew. And thank you so much, Renee and David. That was really great. We're going to wrap up our workshop today, just sharing a few additional resources with you all. The first is the WaterTalks website. So you can find information about the WaterTalks program and actually participate in the community survey that Amanda Begley mentioned earlier. So you can follow the QR code, or a link will be placed in the chat for the WaterTalks website. Next slide. Next resource we wanted to share is the Redesign LA website. This is something that Council for Watershed Health helps keep up and running. And there's a page on outreach and engagement under resources that has a number of engagement resources for you all to check out and engage with moving forward. Next slide. Also on the Redesign LA website, getting to that concern around funding and budgeting, one of our team members keeps the grant opportunities spreadsheet pretty updated. So that's a good place to look for funding opportunities in our region, particularly related to water, but that may help around community engagement as well. Next slide. And lastly, as we were putting together this workshop, a number of resources sort of rose to the top. And so we put together this flyer for this workshop that has a number of the resources mentioned or used to put together the workshop. And last slide. Thank you again for all being here. We're gonna hopefully give you a few minutes back to your day, ending a little early. But we invite you to our Upper Santa Clara River workshop, which is December 13th. And as you close out of the Zoom, it'll prompt you to take a survey. We're going to be sharing a few of our Landscaping Lightly calendars with folks who fill out the survey. We'll do a raffle. So please fill out that survey so we can improve this workshop and hear what your experiences were. Thank you for your time, and we hope today was useful and something that will sort of guide our collective engagement work moving forward. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, Brian, thanks for being here. I'm going to put you in the waiting room, but we really appreciate you checking the workshop out. Didn't get a chance to say hi earlier.
Great job, everyone. That was amazing.
Really amazing job. Really.
And we finished on time.
I know, we were early.
Yeah, fair. Really great work. Wow. Just, I mean, I've seen a little bit of here.